Hello and welcome to the Success Showcase. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin from the Modern Observer Group, and with me as always is Chip Janiszewski from the Happiness and Success GPS. Chip, how you doing this week?
Doing great. How about you, Eric?
Doing fantastic. We are coming up on August, and I cannot believe how quickly this year is going.
Time flies when we're getting old, Eric.
It really does. Yeah.
It's crazy, but it's a fun month for me too because my wife's got a birthday coming up at the end of the month, so can't forget that.
Mm-mm.
So
Nope, it's very important you remember that. You know the line, happy spouse, happy house. Yeah.
perfect.
Well, we've got a special guest with us this week, Lori Tsugawa, who is a samurai strategist and an expert on Bushido. And she teaches business people how to use the Bushido Code in their businesses and lives. So, Lori, welcome. Why don't you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Eric and Chip. This is quite an honor. I am a samurai strategist. I actually am a descendant of the samurai, and I found out through research because of our crest. And our crest is one of the crests of feudal Japan for the samurai lineage. So I knew that samurai DNA was in me when I saw that. And I grew up in a very rural background. My father was a farmer, so I'm a farmer's daughter and faced a lot of prejudice and bullying when I was growing up and just did not want to be Japanese. But then as I became older and started looking more into my background, I realized that I have a rich heritage and not only a Japanese, but actually samurai who were only about 10% of the population. So I studied their code of ethics in Bushido. Bushi is warrior, do is the way. So Bushido is the way of the warrior. And they live by a code of ethics known as Bushido. And it entails courage, integrity, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. And they pledge their lives and their sacred honor to uphold the code and to defend their daimyo, their lord, their master, their village. And they took that very seriously. And that code of ethics is what I believe made them great warriors. And it's permeated down into the Japanese society even today. Even though they don't sit down and teach them about Bushido, they teach by example. And it's a very safe, Japan is a very safe country. And I love it. I take people there once a year. And the emphasis is about the samurai, because if one wants to become like a modern day samurai or know more about it, it's great to visit the country, because then you can hear it, you can feel it, you can taste it. The food is so good in Japan, and this experience like no other. You feel so safe and people are so kind. So that's what I do, is I teach about that. And Ikigai is knowing your purpose in life, from Japan, of course, actually Okinawa. And then Gambaru is to never give up, because you can have great plans, great ideas, but if you give up, what happens? You don't finish it. So that's what I do in my coaching program.
Fantastic. So you are descended from samurai. Now, I think it is safe to say most Americans have an idea of samurai that's probably been greatly corrupted by Hollywood.
Probably.
So, so what can you tell us that, what maybe misinformation we have about samurai, or, what should people understand about the samurai warrior?
Well, they were great warriors, and that was of course, the left side of the brain. They practiced the martial arts, and they took that very seriously. But then there's also the right side, the poets and artists, and they had that code of ethics, which made them kind of separated, or made the distinction between a lot of other warriors of their time and in other times. And there were lots of battles, and I don't go into that so much, because I think that the mindset is what really distinguishes the samurai. And I'm not so interested in the battles. The battles were great, and but they're a little bloody. And I tend to go more towards the right side, and what made them great, and what makes Japan a great country even today.
All right, so let's talk about that mindset, or as you said, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, the Bushido Code.
Excellent. Yes. And that moral code, as I mentioned, had the courage, integrity, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty. And that was a code of ethics that they lived by. And it became very, shall we say, famous about the turn of the 20th century. And I believe, well, actually, in the 20th, yes. So that would be the 1900s, and it was brought to the forefront by Nitobe, and he wrote a book about the soul of the samurai. And I did a lot of my research there, but I just feel like today in our society that people are looking for leaders. They're looking for people to follow, and who better to follow than to people that you know, like, and trust. And so good morals never go out of style. They're needed in today's society. And as we look around, we can see that, yes, everyone could use to have that moral framework for a better society. Because I believe that, people are looking for answers, and our society has gone a bit awry.
It
Yeah,
certainly has.
Yeah, I mean, and you yourself obviously have experienced adversity in your life. Not only with the prejudice and so on and so forth growing up, but you went through a personal life experience and have used this not only to recover yourselves, but to pay it forward and just share it with
Yes.
others. And you've made a career out of it. So tell us a little bit about that experience and how you got through it and how you are the perfectly normal but absolutely wonderful person that you are right now.
Well, that's very kind of you. In 05 and 07, I was rear-ended 2 times. And the first time was mostly chronic pain. And that took a while. And then by the time of 07 came, that was about 18 months later. I wasn't fully recovered, but I knew something was different, because I knew up here that there's something different about my brain. And I was right. I was reading at a 7th grade level, and my cognitive abilities were compromised. So I did go through a lot of therapy for the brain through a speech pathologist, and then also division therapy, because I did not want to be reading at a 7th grade level. In fact, an ophthalmologist told me that there was no correlation between the accident and reading at a 7th grade level. So I had to seek out providers that, shall we say, are more up to date on procedures and what happens to the brain, because the brain is it's a very small organ, but it's a very fragile organ, even though it's encased in the skull, because the inside of the skull is not smooth like that, the exterior. And then you have your 12 cords that go up and down your spine, and 4 of those happen to be connected to vision. So I was not reading very well, and basically I was not a very high functioning person. I would get lost. I was messed up. That's all I have to say. I was messed up. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether or not I was going to succeed, but I decided, don't give up. And that's what my parents told me. That's what they taught me. They didn't say, don't give up. They taught us that, because I'm a farmer's daughter, and you don't quit picking berries just because the day's over. If it's raining, you go out there and pick the berries, because they could rot the rest of the row. And that's how I learned about never giving up. And my parents taught us that through example. They never gave up.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how important it is to persevere. And especially when you're dealing with a physical injury. Most people, they'll experience the pain, or they'll experience the disability, and they'll go, well, this is it, this is who I am now. And they don't realize that, yes, they can come back with it.
Yes,
they
you
can overcome it, but it does take a lot of work, and it does take perseverance.
It does. There's a Japanese proverb, it's one of my favorite: fall 7 times and stand up 8. And I don't know if you've read about Miyamoto Musashi. His goal or intention was to be the best swordsman in Japan. And he fought about 60 battles, if you can imagine. And he had different strategies. One of them was to arrive late, and that would just fluster his opponent. And he would come in and, do his thing. And he was, can you imagine 60 battles and coming out alive? I think he quit after the 60th or something around there, but that was his goal, was to be the best swordsman in Japan. And as a samurai, that was his goal. And he has lots of strategies. You don't give up, you persevere, because like my mother used to teach me, there's always a way. If you have a goal, there's somebody on the other side that would like to help you achieve your goal. It's like yin and yang, opposite. You have a goal, or you have a skill or gift that can help somebody else. Like if you're a weight loss coach, if you want to lose weight, there's somebody out there that wants to help people lose weight. So no matter where you are or how old you are, I believe there's always a solution. There's always a way. You just need to dig and find and persevere.
Absolutely. That's, the core of the growth mindset. And we talk about that a lot on this podcast. And it is a crucial factor in success because, as Henry Ford said, if you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Right. Yeah, I love that one, because a lot of times you will hear people say, oh, woe is me, and I won't do this, and the economy's bad. But people prospered during COVID, and there's always a way. Yes. to reach your goals. And you just set your intention instead of say, oh, I hope, I want, I wish. Instead of saying that, say, I intend. That's my intention. That's my goal. I'm going to do it, and I'm going to fight until the end. I won't give up.
Yes, and setting your intention is a very powerful mindset tool.
Yes.
It focuses you. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is just how important that is. And they'll say, well, maybe I'll do this, or maybe it's like, no, you have to, make that intention known.
Yes.
And put it out there to sort of solidify your efforts.
Exactly. And like you said with Henry Ford, and as I mentioned, had I quit, or had I just say, oh, well, que sera, sera, most of my speech pathologist patients were quit. They got tired. And there were times that I wanted to quit. I'd be at her office and crying because I can't figure this out. And she would encourage me, but I knew I could not give up. And I was in her office for quite a long time, about 6 years, and went to another speech pathologist that worked with the audio because I can hear well, but it wasn't making that connection upstairs. And that happens to be my weakest form of receiving information: audio, visual, and then kinesthetic. I'm very kinesthetic.
So tell us a little bit about how you use Bushido in your work and training people to become better leaders using it.
Well, that's a good question. Thank you, Eric. What I did is I actually wrote my book, Let the Samurai Be Your Guide, and it's about the 7 principles of Bushido. Plus, I added Gambaru at the end because I wanted my mother to be in the book, because she inspired me so much. She never let us quit, and she believed in me and always talked about, she wouldn't let us quit. And so that's how I grew up. And my dad too was a farmer, and you just don't quit when you're a farmer because you're tired or it's wet. You just keep going. And what I do is I teach people through my book about different people that exemplify the code. Like, for example, Chuni Sugihara was the chapter about courage. He was a Japanese diplomat from Japan to Lithuania in World War II. And he had the opportunity to write transit visas to save the lives of the Jewish people. And all the other consul's office closed, and most of them said no, but he telegraphed, I was going to say he emailed, no, he telegraphed the government, and 3 times they said, no, you do not write those visas, those transit visas. And so he went to his family, and his family said, Papa, you taught us to put ourselves in their shoes. What would they want? And so that was a decision that was made, that he would write the transit visas, even though he could face a lot of bad consequences. One of them could be imprisonment, which he was, and one of them was death. He lost his job and was not able to find job as a diplomat after that because of the incident that he defied his government. But he says, what's wrong with saving lives?
Yeah, that's a fantastic story. And yeah, that's something that hopefully people will use to put their own issues into perspective. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, for this man, it was literally death. I mean, he was risking his life to do this.
His family too.
And and the lives of his family. And most challenges that people face, the consequences are much lighter than that. And yet it overwhelms them. So by using these examples, it shows how you can act and how you can have the strength to move forward, even in dire circumstances.
Yes. And most of the examples of the people that I featured were Japanese Americans, especially the Japanese Americans that were the second generation, like my father's, and they were the brave soldiers that came out of the they call them internment camps, but they were really concentration camps because they were sent there like my parents were without having a trial and being locked up in a 20 by 20 room, but they made the most of it. And that's what I loved about the Japanese. They didn't sit around and in protest or whine or cry. They made the most of it. And there were 30,000 young Japanese Americans that volunteered to fight for the US Army. But it wasn't until Eleanor Roosevelt said, you really should told her husband, give them a chance. They want to fight. They want to prove their loyalty. And they were the most highly decorated unit in US military history for its size and length of time in service. Their stories are just they bring. I mean, I cry a lot when I hear their stories of the sacrifices that they made, and they wanted to do it so that their parents and their brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, and the future generation like me would have a better life. And because of them, we owe them so much, or I owe them so much.
Absolutely. And again, it's something that people should take a look at in terms of perspective. It's like they weren't simply doing this to make their lives better. They were actually thinking about future generations and their neighbors and their country. And they wanted to, they were thinking big to make life better.
They did. And even today they're celebrated in France in Texas. They became the troop that went to, it was called the Lost Battalion, and they went in with 800, came back with only just like 200 people, but they fought and they rescued what other people couldn't do. They were without equal. That's all I have to say. And my uncle was part of the MIS, which was the Military Intelligence Service, and they translated documents, about 18,000, and so that helped the Allied force.
Yeah, it's amazing the stories that you're talking about. And basically, perspective is the key word, because perspective is just the way that we look at things. And we always talk about the present moment being a choice, and how awareness is just so important, that we are all going to mess up and life is always going to be like this. But if in the present moment we have that perspective, realizing that we have a choice to do something positive right now.
Yes.
We can turn every yes but into a yes and keep building on it and build that momentum, just like you've been doing it and your ancestors have been doing it, and look at where we are right now. I mean, I know I've talked about this several times on the podcast, but if you can just picture a world where people are walking around without seeing for a week and just feeling and basically enjoying the world around them, the people around them, and so on and so forth, without having any way of judging or classifying people because of sight. Imagine what a wonderful world this would be. And everybody has that inside of them. And what you are doing is just pulling that out of them through basically all of your principles. I mean, courage, integrity, respect, honesty, benevolence, loyalty, and honor. That's a recipe for a peaceful world.
It is.
And if everybody could just take those words and concentrate on that, knowing that maybe the next minute somebody's going to do something to you and you're going to get all upset. But you know what? You can go back. We are all human beings. We were all created from love. We are all unconditionally loved, whether we deserve it or not. And that's just the way it is. That's reality. That's being. So it's just so wonderful that you are doing what you're doing, have been through what you're doing, and chose to share it with each other. And obviously, I'm sure that when you are speaking to audiences and whatever, everybody is looking without seeing, and they're just feeling that, and the momentum is there and the aura is there. And for that 30 or 60 minutes that they're listening to you, everybody's won and everybody's walking out sky high. And if they can picture that and carry that with them and take this from this podcast, that's what it's all about. Pardon me for rambling on, but sometimes I got to gush about wonderful things.
Well, that's great. And one thing I didn't mention is during the recovery period, I worked in the prison, the women's prison, and it was really a good experience. And I understood for the first time really what struggling, not emotionally, but mentally really was about. I mean, I'm a fairly bright person and I didn't have to struggle much. And I didn't struggle in my life much, but I knew that those women needed help. And so the lady at the prison just really wanted me there. So she found a class for me to teach, and I taught it for about 10 years. And I would teach the women about life skills and finance and all and everything. But I also taught them from my book, and we went over the book. And sometimes they would get a little testy with me. And I said, you know what? I said, I'd like to share with you about what happened to my parents. And I didn't do that every time. I said, they were in prison. They were put in places. They were put in a little 20 by 20 room with one light bulb and a potbelly stove. And they were there against their will, and they were treated really worse than prisoners, but they did nothing. And they didn't complain. They just made the best of what they have. And so that's what we all need to do, is make the best of what we have. So you have a roof over your head, you have food, you have a gym, you have access to classes, and you can make your life better, because I would really like to help you build a better life for yourself.
Yeah, that's a crucial thing for people to understand, is that there's always the opportunity to improve. It may not seem it, in the midst of a crisis, but if you take that step back and you look at what opportunities are there are all sorts of resources for people to fall back on, that they can make their lives better.
Yes. It reminds me of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. That is
amazing book.
Yes, it's amazing. And I had to ask the ladies to read that book, because, the worst of circumstance, it was horrible and not, starving and slavery, and it was just awful. But his goal was, what is my meaning? And his meaning was his wife, who we all know passed away during the concert at that time. So that was very sad, but he remarried, and it's a wonderful book. And that's what kept him going, because most people passed away. Most people gave up, and that was his why, was his family. So
we talk a lot about knowing your why. And in Frankel's case, his why was what got him through the Holocaust.
Yes.
And I want our listeners to think about that for a moment, because very few of us will ever go through something as intense as the Holocaust. And yet he was able to get through it because of his focus on his why.
Yes.
So now,
millions of books,
yeah,
many languages.
And if you can get through something that severe with it, imagine what the rest of us can benefit from doing that.
Yes.
So what other lessons should people learn from the Bushido Code?
Well, all of those, about courage, integrity, doing the right thing. Because in some ways, in a lot of ways, actually, Sugihara exemplified all of those: honesty, honor, loyalty. But I chose courage for him because I thought, well, a lot of books have been written about him, but not many about the Code of Bushido. So that's what I decided to do. And I thought, my book, which I didn't really put in the forward, was to bring honor to the men and women who survived those American, they call them American concentration camps, and they did that with dignity and honor. And they didn't they wouldn't, my mother wouldn't talk about it. My dad talked about it, and he said, well, we did learn some lessons, it couldn't be helped, or we made the most of it. And they really did. And he didn't go to war because his mother was sick, and she had stage 4 cancer and passed away before the war was over. But in spite of that, he wasn't bitter about it. And that's what's amazing, is he would talk to civic groups and schools, and in fact, he loved talking about it, because there were some good times. He made good friends, and the Japanese community of that second generation was very close, because they didn't have other cousins and aunts and uncles. They were each other's cousins and uncles. So we have an extended family of cousins, and 2 of them went with me to Japan, and so that was nice. They are like cousins. We've always thought of them. We called them mom, aunt, and uncle, and so we had a large family, extended family.
Nice. Now, aside from your book, you also do speaking engagements. How do audiences react to your message?
Most like it. I did a couple of TEDx talks, and I spoke about my grandmothers, and I spoke for Humanities Washington, and that was my subject, was about how Bushido comes into modern day life. And if you think about it, people all need a code of ethics, and if they don't have one, I encourage them to adopt one or all of the code of Bushido, because good morals never go out of style. That's my belief. And my intention is to encourage them and to help them be all that they could be, because there's so much more. Like Einstein said, the brain only utilizes about 10% max of what it's capable of. So we are capable of so much more. And why not do it while you're alive? Why not make the most of it and help others along the way and enjoy life? That's what life was for. It wasn't for drudgery and all these kind of things. But, life can be wonderful, and it can be even wonderful in adverse circumstances.
That's a fantastic message. And we are just about at the end of our time. So if somebody wants to get a hold of your book, learn more about what you do, how can they do so?
Well, thank you for asking. My website is loriwhaley.com, LORIWHALEY.com. That's my website. And the name of my book is called Let the Samurai Be Your Guide on Amazon. And it's published by Tuttle Publishing. And unfortunately, because of the green screen, I'm not able to show you that, but it's called Let the Samurai Be Your Guide.
Let the Samurai Be Your Guide. I love it. Thank you so much for being with us. Chip, what do you think is the big takeaway for our listeners this week?
Well, first of all, I highly recommend going to that website, because in there, it really explains the whole thing. You are the samurai strategist, and it says right in the website, and I can't say it any better, so I'm just going to read this. And it says, using concepts from your Japanese samurai heritage, your mission is to instill the samurai warrior principles of Bushido. Again, courage, integrity, benevolence, respect, honesty, honor, and loyalty as a means of overcoming life's challenges to provide a moral framework. And you use the concept of, is it ikigai?
Yes.
Which is a Japanese word that means a reason to live. Talk about Viktor Frankl, to assist individuals in finding and refining their purpose in life. And then finally, the Ganbadu, which is determination that drove the samurai to never give up in spite of circumstances. Basically, these are foundations, these are pillars, and they are everybody's choice. So it's God bless you for doing what you're doing, and thank you so much. And if everybody listening could just go to the website and just grab that paragraph and put that in front of them, what a wonderful world this would be.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I think for me, the big takeaway is how important it is to have a code of ethics, whether it's Bushido or something else. So many people have gotten away from it, and it is core to who we are. And people really do need to adopt these ideas and understand that life is bigger than yourself. You need to
Yes.
be there for other people and your community, as well as taking care of yourself. And to do so ethically benefits us all. So again, thank you so much for being here. You've been listening to the Success Showcase. You can catch every episode at xvadio.com, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and wherever you find podcasts. Remember, make this your best week ever and make next week even better. We'll see you then.